Hello, everyone. I have reached the point where I'm ready to give my thoughts on Dying Light 2. Not only did I progress very far in the game, but also I've listened to other YouTube videos in regards to this game. I will do my best to avoid spoilers in the event that nobody has purchased the game yet. That way you can hear kind of like unspoilerly thoughts on whether or not you should buy it. That said, the first topic I want to get into is game design. Game design and planning is really important. Whenever you're planning for a game, you have got to set a goal. For example, is it going to be a Battlefield-like game? Well, then it needs to focus on, huge multiplayer maps. It needs to focus on chaotic combat and all of that. When it comes to RPGs are, generally speaking, going to be your story-based games. And a lot of people that play story-based games are going to be the ones that aren't really the best at certain things. Of course, there's going to be exceptions like the Dark Souls people who played, that RPG, and it is just a brutally harsh game. But for the most part, it is going to be the casual players that are playing RPGs. When you design a game like that, you have to keep in mind that there are going to be people who need alternatives or things like that. And I'll go ahead and start talking about that now. I would say the biggest negative of Dying Light 2 is just how much parkouring has evolved. It's nonstop, it's repetitive, and unfortunately, it just gets exponentially worse by the time you get towards the end game. When you get towards the end game, you start reaching parkouring activities that make me realize that somebody who doesn't like heights will definitely be squeamish in these scenarios. Now, keep in mind, I've been skydiving, so I'm okay with heights. But it's one of those things that once I got to that height, I was just like, oh man, I would feel sorry for somebody if they were terrified of heights as is, because this game definitely would make this a problem for those types of people. That comes back to the whole game design that I was talking about. There should have been an alternative to approaching these parkour events in some form or another. I think that if they were going to make parkouring the main theme of the game, then they should have had something in place to say, well, hey, we understand that you're not a fan of heights, and we'll just teleport you if you reach X spot, or something like that. I think that would have been a perfect compromise if other alternatives weren't designed in place of that. I think that would have been a great way to handle it. Okay, so that's parkouring. I want to talk about crafting now. I don't think this is really going to be a spoiler because you start seeing crafting very early on in the game, and it's not like you would know that crafting is involved from Dying Light 1 if you played that. And if you didn't play Dying Light 1, well, crafting is involved in a bunch of games. I don't think that anything I'm about to say is a spoiler, but moving on. When it comes to crafting in Dying Light 2, that's the other big negative in my opinion. The problem with crafting is it takes so many freaking resources that it results in you having to do some pretty lame stuff to farm. And you'll even see YouTube videos of that stuff. The best farming method that I've discovered is just to get max level, which you can do before ending the game, and go back to the beginning zone to farm there, because once you're max level, all the high damage weapons will unlock, and you'll have everything that you need in terms of HP, stamina, tools, and all of that. And so what you want to do is you just want to trigger chases left, right, and center once you get back to the beginning zone after you've reached max level. That's literally the best way I can see of to farm the materials that you need, because Other than that, it's just difficult to reach the amount of resources you need to end to reach end level of a recipe or blueprint, whatever it's called. You would need 100 of one resource, and I won't say which one to avoid spoilers, but 100 per end crafting level. And there are a ton of schematics in the game. In my opinion, that's just too high of a cost. I think that the game should have been designed in such a way that it would allow you to experiment with the different tools and accessories that they offer by lowering those costs to a point where it would be feasible to upgrade maybe 2 or 3 blueprints to max level before resorting to this farming method. I think that would have been a reasonable start. Okay, that said, let me talk about the enemies now. I think that's the other negative of this. While most enemies in the game aren't an issue, there are just a select few that are really gimmicky. What I'm referring to is one particular human enemy that's kind of a boss, semi-boss. I'm not really sure how to classify it, but it has the ability to do 3 power strikes back to back, and it's just like you can't avoid that, even with the best dodging timing, because it not only does it 3 times, but it tracks you as you move. And it's just like, really? If the point of dodging this is to not get hit, then what am I supposed to do if the thing tracks me? It's just like the zombie enemy, that the big one that does the slam. It tracks too, so you can't juke it. You can't just wait until like the last second before it swings and then move right and expect it to miss. No, it tracks you just like the human enemy does. And in my opinion, that's too gimmicky. There should have been a clear way to avoid that. Unfortunately, there's not. In addition to those gimmicky enemies, you also have one that does a charging effect on the zombie side of things. And this charging zombie, unfortunately, its only weak spot is the lower body. It's just impossible to do anything against it with melee, because melee swings in an arc. So because melee swings in an arc and not a thrust, it's impossible to hit that particular enemy with melee weapons. You have to resort to using ranged weapons or something else to really deal with it. And that's really, really unfortunate. The other part of this enemy that makes it problematic is because it's able to charge constantly. There's no cooldown in between its charges. So just like the other 2 mentioned enemies, it's capable of just doing whatever it wants. And to make matters worse, this enemy plus the one I was mentioning, the zombie one that does the slam attack, they can stun you into oblivion if they really wanted to. There is no break in between, so they could just... There could be multiple of them, and they could just keep you pinned down until you die. There's no way to recover from that if you get into that situation, which is not something that people would think of to do or be aware of in that particular situation. Literally, the only thing I've found to do with those enemies is to find the highest place you can go. Only way to deal with them. That's it. And that's really unfortunate that there's no other counter to them. Oh, and the exploding zombies. Yeah, the exploding zombies, they're just as much of a problem because they knock you down too, and they come in groups. So they're actually more gimmicky than the other 2 because of them working together in groups to keep you down. But okay, moving on. So that's enemies. I would say about the only positives of Dying Light 2 is the story and choices you make. I think it's really cool that they've made it possible to make those kinds of choices. I think RPGs with choices is a must in this day and age. If an RPG doesn't have choices or arcs, then I think something's missing from it. Unless they've managed to plan the game in some way that it accounts for that. But either way, so I do think that it's great that it has a arc to it and many choices to make. I think the other good thing about it is that it's not a difficult game outside of the parkouring. So people who are looking for more of a casual RPG could certainly play this game and not be overwhelmed in terms of completing missions and things like that. Once you figure out the gimmicks of the enemies, you know how to avoid them. But I think that the gimmicks should have been in place to start with. I think that there should have been some sort of counter to it. Either way, the game is relatively easy for somebody just get into, play the story, and be done with it. If you ever need to get caught up on Dying Light 1 story, there are plenty of YouTube videos for that, so you could certainly skip Dying Light 1, go straight into 2. That's good because the story is pretty easy to understand. That's another positive. It's not like some other game that's like 3 in a series where you have to learn the story for all 3 type of thing. No, it's just one storyline, and it's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. So that's really good. It's great that people can skip to Dying Light 2 if they really want to. I would say the only other positive that I can find of with Dying Light is, while the whole meter thing, I guess you can call it, is very annoying to deal with early on. It's kind of like Subnautica. If anybody's played that game, then you know how annoying the oxygen alert is annoying. This game has a similar meter system going on, and the problem with that meter system is, well, just like the Subnautica thing, it's very annoying to deal with. Though I will say that as annoying as it is to deal with, luckily it's pretty easy to work around because they've designed the maps in such a way that there are plenty of places to fix the meter. That's the most I'll say to avoid spoilers. You'll figure out what the meter is if you play the game. But other than that, I really don't have much else to say about Dying Light 2, because really, this game is fun in its own right, but it's just got so many issues with it. Issues that I would have thought wouldn't have existed from a developer like this, but I guess everyone makes mistakes. Either way, my summary is this. I think that Dying Light is really not worth $60. So if you want to wait to play this game, by all means, you're welcome to. I would wait until it's at least $40. In my opinion, that's what Dying Light 2 is worth. There's certainly a lot of things that they could have done to make the game more convenient for the many different types of player bases out there. I think that they also could have been sensitive towards people with issues with heights as well. I think that should have been considered during the design. But yeah, other than that, I really don't have much else to say. Thanks for listening.